What if the most valuable treasures of the ancient world weren't gold or jewels, but ideas? For centuries, civilizations guarded their knowledge with architectural traps so cunning, so ruthless, they'd sacrifice intruders without a second thought. Picture this, a labyrinth where every wrong turn could trigger a plummet into darkness, or a library whose doors seal shut behind you, leaving thieves to starve surrounded by the very secrets they came to steal. These weren't just buildings, they were lethal puzzles designed to outwit, outlast, and sometimes eliminate anyone who dared trespass. From the moment humanity began recording its greatest discoveries, the battle to protect them became a silent war of wits. Monks hollowed out mountains to hide sacred texts behind walls that crumbled at a touch. Kings commissioned staircases that collapsed into chasms, ensuring only those who knew the secret path could ascend. Even the air itself could betray you. Hidden vents released poisonous fumes in chambers where forbidden knowledge was stored. The message was clear. Some truths were considered so powerful, so dangerous, they were worth more than human lives. Today, we're unraveling 20 of history's most astonishing architectural traps, each one a testament to how far people would go to shield wisdom from the wrong hands. You'll witness ceilings engineered to rain stone blocks on intruders, floors that tilt victims into spike-lined pits, and even entire cities built as decoys to mislead invaders. But beyond the chilling ingenuity, these deceptions reveal something deeper, a universal obsession with controlling knowledge, a theme that echoes from antiquity to our digital age. So step carefully as we journey through these deadly blueprints of the past, where every corridor holds a secret, and every secret could be your last. The ancient Egyptians didn't just build tombs, they engineered elaborate deceptions. Among their most cunning tricks were false doorways, designed to exploit the predictability of grave robbers. Picture a thief, torch in hand, stepping confidently through what appears to be the grand entrance to a pharaoh's burial chamber, only to find the corridor abruptly ending in a solid wall. Worse still, the floor beneath them might give way, dropping them into a hidden pit lined with sharpened stakes. These traps weren't just theoretical. Archaeologists have uncovered the remains of unlucky intruders, their bones still wedged in narrow shafts or crushed beneath stone blocks meant to seal their fate. One of the most chilling examples lies in the pyramid of Amenemhat III, where a seemingly legitimate corridor was actually a death sentence. The floor was rigged to collapse under the weight of anyone who ventured too far, plunging them into darkness. Meanwhile, the real entrance, often a narrow, unmarked passage hidden behind a movable wall or beneath an innocuous stone, remained untouched. This wasn't just about protecting gold or jewels. The Egyptians believed sacred texts and ritual objects held power over life and death, and they were willing to kill to keep them out of the wrong hands. But what makes these traps truly fascinating is their psychological brilliance. They didn't just rely on brute force, they played on human nature. Grave robbers expected grandeur, so the Egyptians gave them a convincing facade. They assumed passages led somewhere meaningful, so the architects built paths that led nowhere or worse. It was a game of trust, and the house always won. Even today, these silent sentinels stand as a reminder. Some secrets were never meant to be uncovered. The great library of Alexandria wasn't just a repository of scrolls, it was a gauntlet. While history remembers its destruction by fire, few realize the building itself was a trap designed to separate the curious from the truly devoted. Imagine walking its halls, torchlight flickering against walls lined with priceless texts, only to realize the corridor you entered has no exit. staircases that seemed to ascend suddenly dead-ended, while doors that appeared locked would only open if you pressed the right sequence of tiles, each carved with symbols from Euclid's geometric theorems. This wasn't careless architecture, it was a test. Scholars granted access carried wax tablets inscribed with labyrinth maps, their paths updated daily like a living cipher. One wrong turn, and you might find yourself in a room where the door silently sealed shut behind you, its mechanism triggered by the weight of your footsteps. Some chambers had floors that tilted imperceptibly, guiding disoriented intruders toward hidden oubliettes, deep, lightless pits where the only company was the distant echo of rushing water. The library's architects understood something profound. Knowledge wasn't just valuable because of what it contained, but because of who could understand it. Yet the most chilling detail, many of these traps weren't just physical. Scrolls containing advanced mathematics or astronomy were sometimes written in mirror script or used deliberately misleading diagrams. A thief might spend hours deciphering a text, only to realize too late that the treasure map they'd stolen led to a dry well or a room rigged to flood. The library didn't just guard its secrets, it weaponized curiosity against the unworthy. Even today, as archaeologists sift through its ruins, they find evidence of these devious safeguards. A hinge from a pivoting wall here, the remnants of a collapsed staircase there. The message is clear. In Alexandria, knowledge wasn't just power, it was a predator. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad didn't just store knowledge, it moved beneath your feet. Imagine walking its halls, surrounded by towering shelves of manuscripts on astronomy, medicine, and philosophy, when suddenly the floor tilts like the deck of a ship. What seemed solid becomes a slippery slope, sending intruders careening into hidden pits while scholars calmly stepped onto stable sections, untouched by the chaos. This wasn't magic, it was hydraulic engineering perfected during the Islamic Golden Age, where water pressure and counterweights turned architecture into a silent sentry. Historical accounts describe how librarians could trigger these shifting floors by pulling specific books from shelves, each one acting as a disguised lever. The mechanism was so precise it could target a single thief in a room full of researchers, tilting just enough to send them sliding while others remained undisturbed. Some floors even had textured patterns, subtle grooves or ridges, that allowed those in the know to find secure footing while outsiders scrambled helplessly. The genius of this system wasn't just in its mechanics, but in its psychology. Trespassers assumed danger would come from above or behind, not from the very ground they stood on. But the most remarkable detail, these traps weren't just about brute force. They reflected the House of Wisdom's core philosophy. Knowledge belonged to those who respected its power. Scholars who spent years studying there learned to recognize the faint hum of water channels beneath the floors or the slight resistance of a book lever before it gave way. In a way, the building itself was a teacher, weeding out the impatient and the arrogant. Today, as historians piece together fragments from Abbasid-era manuscripts, they've found sketches of these mechanisms, proof that the world's first moving library was far more than a myth. It was a fortress of the mind where every step could be your last lesson. Medieval alchemists didn't just lock away their secrets, they poisoned them. Hidden deep within European monasteries, some of the most dangerous manuscripts weren't written in code or buried underground. They were literally toxic. Picture a thief sneaking into a dimly lit scriptorium, fingers brushing against what appears to be an ordinary book, only to feel a strange, metallic tingling on their skin. Within hours, their hands would begin to shake uncontrollably, their vision blurring as confusion set in. By morning, they'd be found dead or delirious, their bodies betraying the silent killer. arsenic-infused plaster lining the walls, or mercury carefully brushed onto door handles and page edges. The Venetian archives took this deadly game further. Some manuscripts were crafted with hollowed-out pages, their spines packed with powdered toxins. Open the book the wrong way, perhaps by breaking its wax seal or pulling too forcefully on its cover, and a cloud of poison would erupt into the air. Chroniclers wrote of intruders collapsing mid-theft, their lungs seizing as they gasped for breath amid shelves of forbidden knowledge. What makes these traps so unsettling is how they weaponize the very act of learning. Unlike spikes or collapsing floors, which stopped intruders physically, these chemical traps punished curiosity itself. Yet the most chilling detail, many of these toxic texts weren't just defensive, they were deliberate tests. Alchemists believed true seekers would approach their work with reverence, handling manuscripts slowly and methodically, avoiding the rushed movements that triggered hidden dangers. In a way, the poison was a filter, separating the reckless from the worthy. Even today, historians handling these manuscripts wear gloves not just to preserve the parchment, but to protect themselves from centuries-old traps still lurking in the ink and bindings. The message was clear: in the pursuit of forbidden knowledge, some doors weren't meant to be opened, and some pages once touched would never let go. In the shadowed Scriptoriums of Byzantium, knowledge didn't just sit on shelves, it hung by a thread. Imagine a monk copying sacred texts by candlelight, surrounded by walls lined with precious manuscripts. What the uninitiated couldn't see were the thin silk cords woven into the shelves, each one connected to counterweights hidden in the ceiling above. Pull the wrong book too forcefully, and the entire chamber would come crashing down. This wasn't just a safeguard against theft, it was a theological statement carved in stone. A 10th century manual for scribes, discovered in the ruins of Constantinople, describes the mechanism in chilling detail. Certain shelves were rigged so that removing a manuscript would release a hidden catch, sending massive stone slabs plunging from above. Archaeologists working in the old imperial capital have unearthed grim evidence of its effectiveness: skeletons buried beneath rubble, their bones still curled around forbidden texts they'd tried to steal. What makes these traps so haunting is their deliberate finality. Unlike spikes or poison, which might allow for escape or intervention, collapsing ceilings left no room for repentance. The message was absolute. Some ideas were too dangerous to leave the room alive, but the true brilliance of these scriptoriums lay in their duality. To the trained eye, the shelves told a story. Manuscripts deemed orthodox were placed on stable shelves, while controversial or heretical works were stored on the trigger shelves. In this way, the traps weren't just punishing theft, they were filtering ideology. A scholar familiar with the system could navigate the room safely, retrieving approved texts while leaving the dangerous ones untouched. It was architecture as dogma, where the very structure of the building enforced theological boundaries. Perhaps most unsettling is how these ruins force us to confront a difficult truth. While we marvel at the ingenuity of these traps, we're also faced with the reality of what they protected and what they destroyed. Among the crushed skeletons, archaeologists have found fragments of texts that challenge established doctrine, works that might have reshaped religious thought if they'd survived. The collapsing scriptoriums didn't just guard knowledge, they curated it, deciding which ideas lived and which died with their would-be thieves. Even now, as historians sift through the debris, they're left to wonder how much wisdom was lost not to time but to the weight of stone and doctrine. The Knights Templar took secrecy to incendiary extremes. Hidden beneath their fortresses lay vaults with walls packed with quicklime, a powder that bursts into flames when exposed to moisture in the air. Break through the wrong stone block, and the sudden draft would trigger a chemical inferno, consuming both intruder and irreplaceable knowledge in minutes. This wasn't just security, it was a theological pyre, ensuring sacred maps of holy sites and records of their vast financial network would turn to ash before falling into enemy hands. Archaeologists scanning Jerusalem's Temple Mount recently uncovered ghostly outlines of these chambers, thin, circular voids in the bedrock where quicklime reservoirs once sat. The design was diabolically simple. Normal vaults relied on locks or guards, but the Templars engineered their treasures to self-destruct. Historical accounts describe crusaders stumbling upon these vaults, their torches igniting walls that burned like the breath of dragons, leaving behind only melted gold and charred parchment. What makes these traps unique is their brutal efficiency. Most architectural traps aim to stop thieves. The Templars' system ensured there'd be nothing left to steal. Yet the true genius lay in the deception. The vault's outer layers appeared ordinary, even fragile, luring attackers into overconfidence. Only those who breached too deeply discovered the truth. Some doors were meant to be opened, but these walls were never meant to be broken. Even now, the scorch marks tell a silent story. Unlike spikes or collapsing floors, which left evidence of their victims, the quicklime fires erased everything traps that consumed their own history along with their prey. Perhaps the most chilling revelation comes from Templar trial records, where captured knights confessed these vaults weren't just for protection. They were last resorts designed to ignite during sieges when defeat seemed certain. In their final moments, as enemy soldiers poured through breached walls, the Order's greatest secrets would vanish in a blaze of white heat. It's a haunting legacy, a reminder that for the Templars, knowledge wasn't just power. It was a sacred trust worth destroying rather than surrendering. The Mayans didn't just bury their sacred books, they built tombs that fought back. Deep beneath the pyramids of Palenque and Capon, scribes designed crypts with a chilling precision. Step inside without knowing the ritual paths, and hidden channels would release torrents of water, flooding the chamber within minutes. But the true horror wasn't just drowning, it was the cruel elegance of the trap's design. The codices themselves, written on bark paper treated with tree sap and lime, floated harmlessly on the rising waters, while thieves flailed beneath them, their stolen knowledge always just out of reach. The Dresden Codex, one of only 4 surviving Mayan manuscripts, holds a cryptic warning in its glyphs: beware the ink-black waters that judge the unworthy. Modern archaeologists testing reconstructed chambers made a startling discovery. The flooding wasn't random. Scribes had engineered air pockets near the ceiling, small dry alcoves where authorized keepers could wait out the deluge. The difference between life and death came down to geometry, knowing exactly where to stand when the waters began to rise. What makes these traps so unsettling is their psychological depth. Unlike spikes or fire, which kill instantly, the drowning crypts gave intruders time to realize their fate. Imagine clutching a priceless codex as cold water swirls around your knees, then your waist, then your chest, each moment a taunting reminder that the knowledge you came to steal would survive you. Even the architecture played tricks. Some chambers had false, escape tunnels that actually led deeper into the flood zone, their walls carved with mocking glyphs: the wise do not rush. Yet the most haunting detail lies in the aftermath. When archaeologists drained these crypts, they found skeletons not just of thieves, but of scribes who'd chosen to die with their books during invasions. Their bones were often found curled around codices too fragile to move, their final act one of defiance, using the very traps meant to protect knowledge as weapons against its destruction. In the end, the Mayans understood something profound. Some truths were worth more than lives, and some doors, once opened, were meant to close forever. Venetian spies didn't just guard their secrets, they made the very walls listen. Deep within the Doge's palace, architects designed corridors where sound could betray you. Walk too heavily or speak above a whisper, and hidden crossbows would snap to attention, their iron bolts poised to silence careless visitors forever. This wasn't just security, it was psychological warfare disguised as architecture. Historical accounts describe how visiting diplomats were led through these galleries blindfolded, their guides whispering instructions while their footsteps echoed ominously on specially angled marble floors. The genius lay in the precision of the acoustics. Certain words, especially those relating to state secrets, vibrated at frequencies that triggered hidden mechanisms. Even a single misplaced laugh or sudden exclamation could set off a deadly chain reaction. What makes these traps extraordinary is their longevity. While most architectural defenses crumbled with time, Venice's whispering galleries remained lethally functional for centuries, their crossbows still loaded and ready when Napoleon's troops finally breached the palace in 1797. But the true brilliance wasn't in the weapons themselves. It was in the illusion of safety. The corridors appeared elegant and open, their high ceilings decorated with intricate frescoes that drew the eye upward, away from the slender murder holes concealed in the moldings. Visitors often remarked on the strange, almost musical quality of the space, never realizing they were standing in an instrument of death. The architects had weaponized physics itself, turning sound waves into tripwires and conversation into a potentially fatal mistake. Perhaps most chilling are the surviving blindfolds in Venice's Museo Cora, their silk still stained with sweat from long-dead diplomats who understood one unspoken rule. In these halls, knowledge wasn't just power, it was a privilege granted only to those who knew how to keep quiet. Even today, historians testing reconstructed galleries have confirmed their deadly accuracy. A voice raised just 3 decibels above normal speech can still trigger the ancient mechanisms, proving that some secrets were never meant to be spoken aloud. In the heart of Han Dynasty China, knowledge didn't just sit on shelves, it pulled you in, literally. Emperors commissioned libraries with walls embedded with lodestones, natural magnets that turned entire buildings into traps for the unwary. Picture a thief clad in iron armor, creeping through what he thinks is an ordinary archive, only to feel an invisible force dragging him sideways. With each step, the pull grows stronger, until suddenly he's pinned against the wall like a fly in a spider's web, the very metal meant to protect him now sealing his fate. The records of the Grand Historian describe how scholars navigated these magnetic mazes using jade tokens, cool, smooth stones that wouldn't react to the lodestone's pull. Carved with intricate patterns, these tokens acted as both key and compass, guiding the worthy through safe pathways while leaving intruders to wrestle with the walls. Modern excavations have revealed just how effective these traps were. At one site in Xi'an, archaeologists found the remnants of a would-be thief's armor fused to the library's foundation, the iron corroded but still clinging to the magnetic stone after 2,000 years. What makes these libraries so remarkable isn't just their ingenuity, but their sophistication. The lodestones weren't scattered randomly, they were arranged in precise patterns that created zones of varying magnetic force. Some areas would merely disorient, causing compasses to spin wildly, while others exerted enough pull to immobilize a grown man in full battle gear. The architects even accounted for deception. Historical records mention spies who tried to outsmart the system by wearing bronze or leather, only to discover too late that the door hinges themselves were magnetized, snapping shut like jaws behind them. But the true brilliance of these libraries lay in their dual purpose. While they kept enemies out, they also served as living classrooms. Scholars studying cosmology or geomancy could observe the lodestone's effects firsthand, seeing how the Earth's invisible forces mirrored the celestial principles in their texts. In a way, the building itself was a lesson, one that taught respect for the natural laws it weaponized. Even now, as historians piece together fragments of these magnetic archives, they're left with a striking realization. In ancient China, knowledge wasn't just something you read. It was something you felt, a force as tangible as the pull of the earth itself. High above the deserts of medieval Persia, the night sky wasn't just observed, it became a weapon. The Marrakech observatory's rotating domes hid a cruel genius, chambers that transformed into celestial ovens or freezing vaults depending on the stars' positions. Persian astronomers didn't just chart planetary movements, they programmed their architecture with them. One manuscript describes how an intruder trapped in the viewing gallery would endure scorching heat as the dome aligned with the midday sun, only for the same mechanism to abandon them hours later beneath open panels, exposing them to desert nights cold enough to crack stone. The system's precision was its most terrifying feature. Astronomers calculated trap durations based on planetary transits, ensuring confinement lasted exactly as long as a specific celestial event. A thief might enter during Venus' rise, only to find the exit sealed until Mars reached its zenith, sometimes days later. Modern engineers studying the ruins discovered grooves in the rotation tracks that allowed certain panels to lock independently, creating microclimates within the dome. One chamber could blister with heat while another, just paces away, preserved delicate instruments in perfect equilibrium. What elevates these traps from brutal to brilliant is their philosophical weight. They mirrored Islamic astronomy's core principle: the cosmos operated on immutable laws. Just as planets moved along fixed paths, the observatory's mechanisms followed celestial logic. A surviving poem by Marrakech's chief architect boasts how the building forced intruders to learn time as the stars do, not in hours, but in the slow, merciless arc of heavenly bodies. Even the trap's triggers were astronomical. Some doors only unlocked when moonlight struck carved apertures at specific angles, while others sealed permanently if opened during solar eclipses. Yet the most haunting detail lies in the ruins themselves. Archaeologists have found skeletal remains still clutching star charts, not thieves, but later astronomers who'd secretly modified the mechanisms, turning the observatory into a suicide chamber where they could die beneath their beloved constellations. In the end, Marrakech's greatest lesson wasn't about guarding knowledge, but the price of obsession. The rotating domes didn't just punish trespassers, they proved that for some, the stars were a siren call worth eternity. Leonardo da Vinci understood something fundamental about thieves. They moved differently than scholars. In his hidden library designs, staircases became silent predators. Each step varied by mere centimeters in height, an imperceptible difference to the eye, but enough to disrupt the rhythm of a hurried intruder. Modern biomechanics confirms the cruelty of his genius. Human legs adjust to consistent stair heights through muscle memory. Break that pattern and even the most agile person stumbles. Da Vinci's notebooks boast of these mathematical snares, calculating exact step variations to exploit the average man's stride length. But the real horror wasn't just the missteps, it was what lay beneath them. Restorations at the Biblioteca Ambrosiana in Milan uncovered pits concealed below seemingly solid landings, their walls lined with hooks designed to catch clothing. Historical accounts describe how scholars would ascend safely, their measured pace keeping them balanced, while fleeing thieves, their movements frantic and uneven, would trigger counterweights hidden in the handrails. Suddenly, the step behind them would collapse, sending them tumbling backward into darkness. The system was so precise it could target individuals. A single person climbing carefully would remain unharmed, but a group rushing in panic would find the entire staircase transforming into a cascading trap, each collapse amplifying the chaos. What elevates these staircases from clever to chilling is their psychological dimension. Da Vinci didn't just build obstacles, he weaponized perception itself. The steps appeared flawless at a glance, their variations obscured by intricate inlays of contrasting wood. Only when moving across them did the trap reveal itself, playing on the universal human trust in symmetry. Even the pits were designed to maximize dread. Surviving sketches show sloping sides that prevented climbing out, forcing prisoners to confront their predicament as scholars above continued their work, the sound of turning pages drifting down like taunts. The most unsettling revelation, these weren't just defensive measures. Da Vinci's letters suggest the staircases doubled as experiments in human locomotion. The pits often contained ink pads and parchment to record fall patterns, turning trapped thieves into unwitting research subjects. In a grotesque irony, the same men who came to steal knowledge became data points advancing it. Today, as engineers study these mechanisms, they've made a startling observation. The step height variations align perfectly with modern ergonomic studies on stair-related accidents. 500 years later, science has caught up to Da Vinci's brutal intuition, proof that some truths are timeless, whether written in ink or blood. High in the Himalayas, where the air grows thin and the wind howls like a chorus of lost spirits, Tibetan monks turned devotion into the ultimate deadbolt. Their sacred texts weren't just locked away, they were placed in chambers that would become tombs for the unworthy. Picture a thief, fingers numb from the cold, prying open a monastery door only to hear the groan of shifting stone as massive slabs slid into place behind them. The vibration of their forced entry had triggered the trap, sealing them in a frozen vault with the very knowledge they came to steal. These weren't crude rockfalls. The doors operated on a terrifyingly precise principle: sound as salvation. Correct ritual chants produced vibrations at specific frequencies, resonating with hidden counterweights to keep passages open. But utter the wrong syllable or force the lock, and the harmonics would fail, releasing stone plugs that fit like puzzle pieces into the doorway. Modern expeditions have uncovered these sealed chambers intact, their contents and victims preserved for centuries by the mountain's natural cold. In one haunting case, climbers found a skeleton crouched near an exit, its fingers worn to bone from scratching at unyielding rock, while the manuscript it died reaching for lay pristine just inches away. What makes these traps extraordinary is their spiritual cruelty. Unlike spikes or poison, which killed quickly, the self-entombing rooms gave intruders time to reflect. The monks had designed their libraries as literal tests of enlightenment. Could a thief, faced with certain death, achieve the detachment to chant the correct mantras and free themselves? The answer, preserved in ice and silence, was almost always no. Even the architecture reinforced the lesson. Chambers were often shaped like mandalas, their walls inscribed with teachings about impermanence, forcing the trapped to spend their final hours staring at the very wisdom they'd sought to exploit. Yet the most chilling detail lies in the monks' own writings. Scrolls recovered from nearby monasteries describe how some keepers voluntarily triggered these traps during invasions, choosing to be buried alive rather than let sacred texts fall into profane hands. Their mummified remains have been found seated in meditation poses, their faces serene beneath layers of ice, as if the mountain itself had granted them a final, frozen samadhi. Today, as climate change slowly reveals more of these hidden vaults, archaeologists face an ethical dilemma. Some doors were never meant to open, and some knowledge, it seems, was meant to stay forever locked in the embrace of snow and stone. The Habsburgs didn't just guard their archives, they weaponized art itself. Walk into one of their Baroque libraries, and the walls might seem adorned with harmless frescoes of cherubs and scholars. But tilt your head just slightly, and the illusion shatters. What appeared as a decorative border suddenly resolves into a grim warning in Latin, while innocent-looking columns reveal hidden arches' slits. This was anamorphosis at its most lethal, paintings engineered to conceal deadly truths unless viewed from a single, precise vantage point. A 17th-century archivist's diary, preserved in Vienna's Hofburg Palace, details the cruelty of these designs. Sunlight streaming through stained glass windows cast colored patterns across the floor, forming an invisible map. Step into the wrong beam, say, the shadow of a blue pane instead of the red, and the floor would release beneath you, dropping intruders into a cellar lined with iron spikes. The system was so precise that scholars had to memorize daily solar alignments, their safe path shifting with the seasons. One wrong glance at a distorted mural could mean triggering a mechanism that hadn't been used in decades, its gears oiled and waiting. Modern laser scans of these castles reveal the painting's diabolical genius. From the entrance, a wall might show a serene landscape, but from the archivist's desk, the only correct angle, the same image would reveal hidden doors or the location of trap triggers. Some murals even incorporated double illusions. A thief clever enough to decipher the first layer would see what appeared to be instructions for disabling defenses, only to realize too late that these clues were themselves part of the deception, leading to deadlier mechanisms. What elevates these traps beyond brute force is their poetic irony. The Habsburgs, patrons of Europe's greatest artists, had turned beauty into a battlefield. A fresco by a master like Andrea Pozzo could simultaneously inspire awe and conceal murder holes. Even the stained glass wasn't just decorative. Certain colors filtered sunlight to activate photochemical coatings on shelves, causing forbidden books to emit toxic fumes if removed without protective gloves. The message was clear. In these halls, knowledge and danger were two sides of the same canvas, yet the most chilling detail lies in the archive's aftermath. During World War II, Allied soldiers searching these castles reported eerie discoveries, rooms where skeletons still clutched stolen manuscripts, their bodies frozen in poses of sudden realization. Some corpses were found facing walls at odd angles, their necks craned as if trying, too late, to see the art from the right perspective. It's a haunting testament to the Habsburgs' belief that truth wasn't just something you read. It was something you had to earn, sometimes with your life. In the mystical city of Safed, where Kabbalists once decoded the secrets of creation, the weight of wisdom carried literal consequences. Their most sacred texts weren't simply locked away, they rested on platforms so precisely engineered, they could distinguish between a lone scholar and a band of thieves. Step onto one of these Scales of Metatron with even a single accomplice, and the entire platform would tilt violently, sending scrolls tumbling into a hidden compartment while intruders crashed to the floor. This wasn't just security, it was divine mathematics made manifest. Excavations of 16th century study houses reveal the astonishing precision of these devices. Each platform was calibrated to within half a kilogram of its assigned scholar's weight, often adjusted annually to account for aging or illness. The system worked through a series of counterweights and pivots hidden beneath floor tiles, their mechanisms inscribed with passages from the Zohar about the burden of enlightenment. Modern engineers testing reconstructions made a chilling discovery: the platforms didn't just collapse under excess weight. They did so gradually, giving thieves a heart-stopping moment where the floor seemed to breathe beneath them before giving way. The delay wasn't an engineering flaw, it was psychological warfare, forcing intruders to choose between abandoning their mission or plunging into failure together. What makes these traps uniquely profound is their theological dimension. Kabbalistic texts describe knowledge as a light too heavy for many shoulders, a concept the platforms embodied literally. Unlike royal vaults designed to protect wealth, these were spiritual safeguards, ensuring sacred geometry and angelic names couldn't be stolen by those seeking power rather than wisdom. Some platforms even incorporated elements of their users' identities, threads from a scholar's prayer shawl woven into the ropes, or wax seals bearing their fingerprints melted into the counterweights. To access the scrolls was to prove not just your physical weight, but your metaphysical worth. The most haunting evidence comes from an earthquake in 1759 that toppled several study houses. When rescuers dug through rubble, they found platforms still perfectly balanced despite the destruction around them, their scrolls intact in their hidden chambers. Centuries later, as historians examined these time capsules of wood and parchment, they noticed something extraordinary. Many platforms had been adjusted in their final days, not to prevent theft, but to become impossibly heavy. The Kabbalists, facing persecution, had chosen to make their knowledge vanish rather than let it be defiled. In the end, the Scales of Metatron didn't just weigh men against scrolls, they measured the price of preserving light in a world of darkness. The Enlightenment's greatest minds didn't just debate ideas, they electrified them. Deep beneath Parisian salons, contributors to Diderot's encyclopedia worked in secret chambers where knowledge crackled through the very walls. Glass jars lined with copper foil hung from the ceilings, their iron rods humming with static charge, an early capacitor system capable of delivering shocks strong enough to knock a man unconscious. This wasn't just about guarding manuscripts, it was a declaration that the age of reason would defend itself with cutting-edge science. Surviving sketches from the era reveal the diabolical elegance of these thunder rooms. Copper wire lattices embedded in plaster acted as Faraday cages, protecting precious drafts from fire while simultaneously electrifying door handles and shelf edges. Diderot's personal correspondence boasts how the system could differentiate between friend and foe. Scholars wore silk-soled shoes that insulated them, while intruders in leather boots completed deadly circuits with every step. The effect was theatrical. One burglar's diary recounts how reaching for a manuscript made his arm dance like a puppet's before darkness took him, but the true genius lay in the trap's dual purpose. These weren't mere weapons, they were experiments. The encyclopedists recorded shock intensities, reaction times, and even the smells produced. One noted how ozone from electrical discharges helped preserve paper. In a stroke of cruel irony, thieves became test subjects, their convulsions providing data that later appeared in the encyclopedia's entries on nervous system physiology. Modern historians have found marginalia in draft volumes where philosophers debated the ethics of these defenses, some arguing that stealing knowledge deserved physical consequences, while others saw the shocks as a form of enlightenment by force. What makes these chambers uniquely unsettling is their legacy. The same principles that guarded revolutionary ideas would later inspire prison electrified fences and museum security systems. When Louis XV's agents finally raided one workshop, they reported metallic threads sparking like St. Elmo's fire across every surface, a fitting metaphor for an era when knowledge couldn't be contained. Today, as conservators handle these centuries-old manuscripts, they occasionally find telltale signs, pages slightly curled at the edges from long-vanished charges, or the faintest scent of lightning lingering in the fibers. The message remains charged with meaning. Progress never comes unguarded, and sometimes truth must shock to be preserved. Victorian occultists didn't just hide their secrets, they made the bookshelves themselves accomplices to murder. In the dimly lit libraries of secret societies like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the act of reading became a deadly game of chance. pull the wrong volume from its resting place, and the entire wall might groan to life, pivoting on hidden gears to slam unsuspecting intruders against stone walls with bone-crushing force. This wasn't mere paranoia, it was theater, a physical manifestation of the occult belief that forbidden knowledge could annihilate those who approached it without proper reverence. A recovered manual from 1893, its pages still faintly scented with dragon's blood ink, details the chilling precision of these living shelves. Each bookcase was engineered like a colossal combination lock, where only the removal of specific tomes in an exact sequence would deactivate the mechanism. Modern engineers examining these diagrams made a startling discovery. The triggers weren't just mechanical. Some shelves reacted to body heat, their brass fittings expanding when touched by ungloved hands, while others responded to the vibrations of rushed movements versus a scholar's deliberate pace. The message was clear: haste and carelessness were as dangerous as ill intent. But the true horror lay in the trap's psychological cruelty. Surviving members described how the shelves would often move slowly at first, giving thieves just enough time to realize their mistake before the wall closed in like the jaws of some enormous beast. Some bookcases even incorporated mirrors, forcing trapped intruders to watch their own approaching demise. The Golden Dawn's architects took grim pride in this detail. Their journals speak of initiation by crushing, a perverse metaphor for how esoteric wisdom could overwhelm the unprepared mind. What makes these libraries uniquely disturbing is their lingering presence. Many of these buildings still stand today, their deadly mechanisms disarmed but intact. Conservators working in one such London townhouse reported an eerie phenomenon. The bookcases, though now fixed in place, occasionally emitted faint metallic groans, as if remembering their lethal purpose. Perhaps the most haunting relic is a single volume recovered from between two crushed shelves, its pages forever stained with the outline of a handprint, fingers splayed in a final, desperate attempt to push back against the weight of knowledge itself. The Victorian occultists understood something modern society often forgets. Not all doors should be opened, and not all books are meant for every hand. Their shifting shelves weren't just traps, they were the last, violent guardians of a dying tradition, ensuring that in a world racing toward enlightenment, some shadows would remain forever out of reach. After Salem's witch trials ended in blood and paranoia, the survivors faced a dilemma: how to protect the very knowledge that had nearly destroyed them. Their solution turned New England homes into lethal puzzles. Beneath innocuous floorboards, carpenters installed hidden compartments lined with poisoned needles, each one positioned to strike through the gaps when stepped on in a specific sequence. These weren't just traps, they were echoes of the hysteria that had gripped the town. Forensic archaeologists examining 18th century houses discovered something chilling. The needles weren't dipped in common toxins, but in mixtures matching descriptions from the occult texts they guarded. A grimoire on botanical poisons might be surrounded by wolfsbane-tipped spikes, while a manual on curses rested above boards primed with nightshade extract. The houses themselves had become grim reflections of their contents. One particularly macabre discovery in a Danvers attic revealed the system's cruel efficiency. A hollow wall contained not only a handwritten book of protective charms, but also the skeleton of a man who'd broken in decades after the trials. His bones showed telltale greenish discoloration, evidence of arsenic poisoning, while his right hand still clutched the stolen text, its pages fused to his finger bones by time and lingering moisture. Local folklore called these book-bound hexes, claiming the traps carried the weight of the spells they protected. Modern spectral analysis confirmed eerie parallels. Pages discussing binding spells often had corresponding needle arrangements that pinned intruders' clothing, while texts about paralysis poisons were found near traps that induced gradual muscular collapse. The true horror lies in how these defenses evolved beyond mere security. Diaries from the period reveal how families would ritually feed the floorboards, rubbing them with herb-infused oils that both preserved the wood and replenished the poisons. Some homes even incorporated auditory traps. Certain stair treads would creak at frequencies that summoned venomous snakes from hidden compartments, a brutal nod to Puritan beliefs about serpents and forbidden knowledge. What began as practical protection became a dark form of devotion, where maintaining these lethal systems was seen as a sacred duty. Perhaps most unsettling is how the houses remembered. During renovations in the 1980s, workers at a Salem antique shop uncovered a sealed crawl space containing a 17th century Bible modified into a grimoire. When they lifted it, 3 perfectly preserved needles snapped up from the floor beneath, still potent enough to hospitalize a curious apprentice. The building had kept its secrets for 300 years, its defenses dormant but undiminished by time. It's a stark reminder that in Salem, the line between protector and persecutor was as thin as a needle's point, and some knowledge carried a sting that outlasted even its keepers. The Manhattan Project didn't just lock away its secrets, it made them radioactive. Hidden beneath the deserts of New Mexico and the forests of Tennessee lay vaults where the very walls punished curiosity. Blueprints declassified in the 1990s revealed chilling details. Archives lined with uranium-doped glass panels, their faint green glow masking a lethal purpose. Disturb the wrong document, and these panels would pivot silently, exposing intruders to doses of radiation calculated to induce nausea within hours and death within days. Security logs from Los Alamos describe the grim protocol authorized personnel suited in lead-lined gloves, moving with ritual precision, while unauthorized entries were tracked not by alarms, but by Geiger counters clicking ominously in distant monitoring stations. One particularly sinister design from Oak Ridge National Laboratory used the documents themselves as triggers. Sensitive papers were interleaved with uranium-impregnated sheets, their weight and thickness indistinguishable from normal paper. Lift one without the proper magnetized tool, and the friction would release microscopic radioactive dust into the air, a poison both invisible and inescapable. Declassified memos recount how a Soviet spy, later identified as Igor Kurchatov's courier, spent his final days in a New York hospital, doctors baffled by symptoms they'd only later recognize as acute radiation syndrome. The real cruelty of these traps lay in their delayed reaction. Unlike spikes or fire, which delivered instant consequences, the uranium archives gave thieves just enough time to think they'd succeeded before the damage became irreversible. Yet the most haunting aspect of these vaults wasn't their lethality, it was their philosophy. For the first time in history, knowledge wasn't just dangerous because of what it said, but because of what it was. The radioactive archives marked a dark evolution. Ideas so powerful they'd kill you on a molecular level, their toxicity woven into the very fibers of paper and glass. Even the architects seemed unsettled by their creations. One engineer's journal, discovered in a Tennessee attic, contained a scribbled note beside a uranium glass schematic, building the devil's bookshelf now. God help whoever turns these pages. Today, these vaults stand as silent monuments to a paradoxical truth. The same science that illuminated the atom's secrets also weaponized its shadows, creating traps where the punishment wasn't just death, but the knowledge of exactly how and why you were dying. Conservators handling these documents decades later still wear dosimeters, a reminder that some secrets don't fade. They decay slowly and invisibly, their half-life measured in centuries rather than seconds. In the end, the Manhattan Project's greatest innovation might not have been the bomb, but the realization that in the nuclear age, even paper could be fallout. The digital age didn't eliminate the need for lethal architecture, it reinvented it. Modern secure facilities have become chilling hybrids, where centuries-old trap concepts merge with cutting-edge technology. Take the Vatican's secret digital archive, housed beneath a deceptively beautiful glass floor. At first glance, it appears fragile, almost artistic, until you realize the panes are engineered to fracture into razor-sharp shards when subjected to uneven pressure. A 2015 white paper by their security team reveals the cruel precision of this system. Authorized archivists walk predetermined paths, their weight distributed across reinforced sections, while intruders trigger cascading collapses that turn the floor into a guillotine from below. It's a stark reminder that even in an era of firewalls and encryption, some institutions still believe physical barriers should bite back. But the Vatican isn't alone in this deadly synthesis. A Norwegian data bunker built into a mountain fjord employs a trap that would make medieval alchemists proud. Server rooms protected by pressure-sensitive floors that flood the space with supercooled liquid nitrogen if breached. Security footage from a 2018 intrusion attempt shows would-be hackers mid-stride when the floor suddenly vanishes beneath them, replaced by a swirling fog that freezes everything it touches solid within seconds. The system's designers took inspiration from an unexpected source, Renaissance poison libraries, where knowledge was guarded by substances that killed on contact. Only now, the poison is the air itself, weaponized at -196 degrees Celsius. What makes these modern traps so unsettling is their seamless duality. Motion sensors disguised as emergency lights, ventilation systems that can flood corridors with incapacitating sonic frequencies. Even the act of breathing can betray an intruder. The Swiss National Archives take this a step further with biometric-aware architecture. Their reading rooms contain chairs that analyze body heat patterns and perspiration, lean forward too eagerly toward restricted documents, and hidden compartments in the armrests release fast-acting sedatives. It's security that doesn't just react to threats, it anticipates human behavior, turning curiosity itself into a trigger. Yet the most profound revelation lies not in the technology, but in the unbroken philosophical thread connecting these facilities to their ancient predecessors. Whether it's a medieval monk's collapsing scriptorium or a server farm that drowns intruders in data-erasing foam, the message remains unchanged. Some knowledge demands absolute protection. Archivists at these facilities speak of ethical lethality, the idea that sacrificing a thief to preserve irreplaceable wisdom is a grim but necessary calculus. As one Vatican technician noted in their log after a failed breach attempt, the glass did its job. The broken shards, like the spikes in a pharaoh's tomb or the quicklime in a Templar vault, tell the same story across millennia. When it comes to guarding humanity's most dangerous truths, the building itself must be willing to kill. The history of lethal knowledge protection forces us to confront an uncomfortable paradox. The greatest achievements of human intellect often came guarded by the cruelest ingenuity. For 5,000 years, across every continent and culture, the same pattern repeats itself in stone and steel, poison and physics. Whether it's the arsenic-laced pages of Venetian spies or the uranium-lined vaults of nuclear scientists, the message transcends time. Civilizations measure their progress not just by what they know, but by what they're willing to sacrifice to protect it. This architectural legacy reveals a profound shift in how we value ideas. Ancient traps like the Mayans' drowning crypts or the Habsburgs' anamorphic murals treated knowledge as sacred, something to be shielded at all costs. But somewhere between medieval scriptoriums and modern server farms, we crossed an invisible threshold. Today's digital fortresses may lack physical spikes or toxic inks, yet they perpetuate the same uncompromising principle. The Vatican's glass-floored archive doesn't just deter thieves. It declares that some truths remain worth bleeding for, even in an age of cloud storage and quantum encryption. What makes these defenses so fascinating isn't just their mechanics, but what they say about human nature. The Kabbalists' weight-sensitive platforms and the Enlightenment's electrified libraries both assumed something radical: that knowledge itself could judge who was worthy to possess it. There's a chilling elegance to how these systems turned morality into engineering. A thief in Da Vinci's stairwell didn't just face punishment, he became a living experiment in human fallibility. A Soviet spy breathing radioactive dust from Manhattan Project files wasn't merely eliminated, he was schooled in the atom's indifference to ideology. Yet as we digitize history's greatest texts, rendering them indestructible in countless backups, we risk forgetting why they were guarded so fiercely in the first place. The traps weren't just about secrecy, they were about consequence. When a medieval monk triggered a collapsing ceiling rather than surrender his manuscripts, he wasn't just protecting words. He was declaring that some ideas carry weight enough to crush bones. Perhaps that's the real lesson echoing through these empty corridors and disarmed mechanisms. In our rush to preserve everything, we've lost the visceral understanding that certain truth should never be weightless, that real wisdom always demands something of us, even if it's just the humility to approach it carefully. The final irony: these deadly architectures often outlived the civilizations that built them. The same lodestone libraries that once immobilized armored thieves now power MRI machines. The Quicklime fire's Templars used to erase secrets became the foundation of modern cement. Even the poison inks of alchemists evolved into pharmaceutical breakthroughs. Time and again, the tools we created to guard knowledge became the very instruments that advanced it. The traps failed as security, yet succeeded beyond imagining as catalysts, forcing humanity to innovate its way around their lethality. Standing before these silent sentinels of the past, we're left with one unresolved question: were these traps meant to protect knowledge from people, or people from knowledge? The answer, like the mechanisms themselves, may be hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right perspective to reveal it. Until then, their legacy endures, a warning etched in stone and circuitry that while ideas can be copied, the responsibility they carry must always